There's a moment in every big football match, you've seen it dozens of times over the years, where you sense the game turning. A team that's been defending for their lives suddenly wins the ball. A tired defense is caught flat, a fast man is running into space, and the crowd rises, not because anything has happened yet, but because they can see what's about to happen. That moment came in Miami on Monday evening. Saudi Arabia, who had been under the cosh for the better part of 30 minutes, suddenly broke forward in the 8th minute of stoppage time. Uruguay were committed high up the pitch, and the Saudi counter was clean and clear. The goal that would have won a World Cup match, the goal that would have been one of the stories of this opening round, was there to be scored. And then the whistle blew. Not for a foul, not for an infringement, full time. Right there in the middle of the breakaway, with Saudi players already moving into space and the opportunity unfolding in front of them. The referee had decided, in that moment, of all moments, that enough time had passed. Saudi Arabia drew the match 1-1. They took their point and they walked off the pitch with a result that looked, on the surface, entirely decent. But beneath that surface, a conversation had already started. On the touchlines, in the stands, across football Twitter and every broadcast desk covering this tournament. Was that whistle early? Did Saudi Arabia have a clear goal-scoring opportunity denied to them, not by a defender, not by a goalkeeper, but by the referee himself, before the move had even reached its conclusion? And should it have stood? Let's set the scene properly, because the full picture matters here. Saudi Arabia and Uruguay were meeting in the opening game of Group H in Miami, a group that also contains Spain and Cape Verde. On paper, Saudi Arabia versus Uruguay is a fascinating fixture. Uruguay are two-time world champions, one of international football's oldest and most storied nations, a country where the game is not just a sport, but something close to a national religion. Marcelo Bielsa, the Argentine tactician who has spent a lifetime developing fiercely committed football philosophies, was in the dugout. This was not a team anyone expected to struggle to control a match. But international football at a World Cup has its own rules, and Saudi Arabia, under their Greek head coach appointed just 2 months before the tournament, came into this game with a very specific idea. Their plan was straightforward: stay compact, be hard to break down, and rely on the ability of Mohamed Al-Owais in goal to deal with whatever came through. It worked, largely, for the better part of an evening. Uruguay dominated possession, as they usually do under Bielsa. They pressed high, they moved the ball quickly, and they had the better of the first half in terms of territory, but the goal came from the other end. Abdellah Al-Amri turned in a rebound from a corner in the 41st minute to give Saudi Arabia a lead that stunned a heavily Uruguayan crowd in Miami. It was a Route 1 goal against the run of play, and it gave Saudi Arabia exactly the platform they'd been building toward. The second half became a siege. Bielsa made early substitutions, bringing Darwin Núñez off after a quiet opening period, a decision that speaks volumes about how the match had gone, and the tempo changed significantly once Agustín Canobillo and Nicolás de la Cruz entered the game. Uruguay began to dominate in ways that were harder to contain. They hit the post through Manuel Ugarte from distance, they created chance after chance, and through all of it, Al-Owais stood firm in a way that will be talked about for years in Saudi football. The equalizer came in the 79th or 80th minute, Maxi Araujo turning in a rebound after Al-Owais failed to hold a cross. And then Uruguay, sensing blood, pushed everything forward in the closing minutes. The fourth official indicated 7 minutes of stoppage. By the 8th minute of that added period, with the clock beyond 97, Uruguay were surging forward again. And then they weren't, because Saudi Arabia had broken, clearly, into space, with real pace. And the Italian referee, Maurizio Mariani, blew his whistle.
The Saudi players knew immediately what they'd been denied. The reaction on the pitch told the story.
Arms raised, frustration visible, the sense of something taken away just as it was beginning. Mariani is an experienced official, no stranger to high-stakes matches. He had refereed a Conference League final just weeks before this tournament. Whatever his reasoning in that moment, it was a decision that will be scrutinized carefully. The question that football fans have been asking since Monday night is this: was it simply a judgment call on the time, reasonable if perhaps a fraction premature, or was it something more uncomfortable than that? I want to be careful here because rushing to conclusions about refereeing decisions is one of the things that cheapens football debate. Referees are human beings making split-second calls in a high-pressure environment. They get things wrong. Sometimes the timing of a final whistle falls in an awkward moment. That is not on its own evidence of anything beyond the difficulty of the job. But what makes this particular incident worth talking about is the context of what surrounded it in the same match. It emerged after the game that Saudi Arabia's coaching staff had also been cited for breaching one of the new rules introduced for this 2026 World Cup, a rule banning tactical coaching instructions to players when a goalkeeper is receiving treatment on the pitch. Saudi head coach Georgios Donis was seen passing on information during a stoppage for Al-Awais around the hour mark. That rule was brought in specifically because of incidents in the Premier League, where teams were clearly using injury breaks as tactical timeouts. It's a good rule in principle, and Saudi Arabia appeared to violate it without consequence. So in the same match, you had one team denied a potential winning breakaway in the final seconds, and also apparently benefiting from an unpenalized coaching breach. Football is complicated enough without adding layers like that. Has football seen this kind of controversy before? Of course it has. The World Cup has a long, imperfect history with refereeing decisions that shaped outcomes and sparked outrage. You might remember the 1966 final and the Jeff Hurst goal that remains debated to this day, or the Hand of God in 1986, which was a different kind of human error entirely. In 1998, Argentina's Ariel Ortega was sent off against the Netherlands in the quarterfinal after a headbutt, but the match had already been shaped by a penalty decision that divided opinion bitterly. And just 4 years ago in Qatar, Uruguay were eliminated from the group stage in circumstances that had their players chasing the referee off the pitch. The scene in Doha was chaotic. Whether or not Edinson Cavani deserved a penalty in those dying moments, what was undeniable was that Uruguay felt, again, that the final whistle had fallen at the worst possible time. There is something about Uruguay and late-game refereeing decisions that seems to come up with uncomfortable regularity. For Saudi football fans, and there are many of them watching with enormous pride and emotional investment in this tournament, Monday's result was both a celebration and a frustration. Al-Awais played one of the great individual goalkeeping performances you're likely to see at this World Cup. A 1-1 draw against a two-time world champion, playing a deeply committed defensive game and holding on despite relentless pressure. That is a genuine football achievement. The Green Falcons deserved their point on the balance of the match, but the manner of the final minutes has left something unresolved. Football fans are honest enough to know the difference between a hard-fought point and a match where they felt something more was possible. Saudi supporters believe their team was moving into a real opportunity, not a speculative long ball, not a hopeful run, but a clear and dangerous breakaway when the whistle ended it. Whether that opportunity would have produced a goal, nobody can say with certainty. That's the nature of football, but the chance to find out was not given. What do you think? When a referee ends a match right in the middle of an attacking move, at a moment where added time is still being played and a clear opportunity is developing, does the benefit of the doubt go to the attacking team or to the official's judgment? Because those two things don't always point in the same direction. There's a wider conversation here that FIFA would do well to take seriously. Stoppage time at this World Cup has already been a talking point. The tournament has been praised in several quarters for its commitment to more accurate timekeeping, to reducing the waste and time wasting that plagued previous editions. 7 minutes of stoppage time being signaled, and then the whistle going before that full 7 minutes is played out. That's not a small thing when a World Cup result is at stake.
Group H, as it stands after the first round of matches, has all four teams level on 1 point. Spain, a European champion and heavy favorite for the whole tournament, were held scoreless by Cape Verde, a remarkable result in its own right. Uruguay and Saudi Arabia split their points. Every match in this group now matters enormously, and the goal difference column could become pivotal before this is over. For Uruguay, a win in the next match against Cape Verde feels close to essential if they want to control their own fate. For Saudi Arabia, a point on match day 1 against this opposition is a reasonable start, but they'll need more from what remains. And for Mauricio Mariani and his assistants, well, match officials rarely get the chance to explain themselves. The conversation will continue without them. What I keep returning to, thinking about this match, is the broader question of what these moments do to the integrity of a tournament. FIFA has worked genuinely hard on officiating standards at this World Cup. VAR is in operation. There are protocols. There are experienced referees. And yet, a moment like the one in Miami, however unintentional, reminds you that no system removes human judgment from the equation entirely. It can't. Football is too fast and too complicated for that. And the problem with human judgment, even when it's exercised in good faith, is that it lands differently depending on who it affects. If that whistle had blown when Uruguay was on the breakaway, with a chance to win the match in the dying seconds, the conversation would be very different and very loud. In international football, the perception of fairness matters almost as much as fairness itself. That's something FIFA has always known. The test is whether they take that seriously enough when incidents like this arise, rather than letting them drift into the background as the tournament moves on. I suspect Saudi Arabia's players and staff will move on quickly enough. They're professionals, they have more games to prepare for, and dwelling on what might have been is a habit that rarely serves anyone well. But the fans? Football fans hold on to these moments, especially when they happen at a World Cup. Would you have called the game there? With Saudi Arabia breaking clear, with added time still on the clock? That's not a rhetorical question. I genuinely don't know what the right answer is, and I suspect most honest football people would admit the same. If you found this worth your time, a like helps this channel reach more people who take football seriously. Subscribe if you want to follow the 2026 World Cup in this way. Real analysis, real context, no noise. And leave your thoughts in the comments below. Particularly if you watched that match. I want to know what you saw. Group H has barely started, and already it has given us enough to argue about for weeks. That's the World Cup. That's always been the World Cup. And somehow, infuriating as it sometimes is, that's part of why we love it.